r/NoSleep. Posted by u/CIAHerpes. The Paperman comes to my house at night. He warns me someone will take my family away from me. The canned laughter of the sitcom roared through the living room as I sat with my wife and 2 young daughters. My wife put a thin arm around Alice's shoulder. The character on the TV made a snarky remark, and the fake laughter from the TV erupted in response. My wife and 2 daughters laughed along, but something seemed wrong. I glanced out the front window into the darkness outside. A pale face with flames in its eyes stood there, watching me with a smile like a grinning death's head. Its bleached white, hairless skin looked tight against its pointed, reptilian skull. It raised a newspaper to the window, grinning wider. Its teeth were black. They gleamed filthy and dark as tar. I continued to stare at it in horror, my family oblivious to the danger right next to them. "Entire family found dead," the headline screamed. I turned to my wife, grabbing her arm with a trembling hand. "Do you see it?" I whispered in horror, pointing. But the window was empty now. The sky outside loomed black, cloudless and flat as an abyss. "What?" she asked in a curious voice. "The sky?" I could only sit there, speechless. The headline had sent shards of ice through my blood, but I didn't know why. I felt like I had forgotten something important, but I couldn't imagine for the life of me what it was. I just felt happy to be sitting with my family, however. "No," I said, my voice fading off. "Nothing." I dug into the giant bowl of popcorn laid on the table between the 4 of us, taking a handful and shoving the delicious, buttery kernels into my mouth. A few minutes later, I got up to go to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror, expecting to see a tired, aging man standing there, lines of stress faded into his skin and gray hairs marking the passage of time. But I saw the eldritch, pale being there instead. It grinned at me, its black teeth sparkling, its eyes of flame flickering like strobe lights. They gave off a bloody, orange glow throughout the entire bathroom. "Who are you?" I whispered in horror. "What is this?" "They call me the Paperman, and I bring the news, friend," it hissed through its black teeth, its grin never faltering. "And the news I bring to you is this: there are many black, faceless monsters outside coming to take your family away from you. Don't let them in. Fight them to the end, friend. They are from the pit, from the dark rivers of hell, from the underworld." "Why would I believe anything you say?" I asked, a sense of unreality still making me wonder if I would wake up at any moment from this bizarre encounter. Why would someone want to take my family away from me? "Because they heard the news, too," the pale creature gurgled. From nowhere, it pulled up the same newspaper, putting it to the mirror. It loomed larger than life there, taking up the entirety of the looking glass. I could see the headline and subtext. "Entire family found dead. A family of 4 was found dead in their home tonight, murdered." I stopped reading, ripping my eyes away. A shard of terror pierced my heart like an arrow. Was this how it happened? I thought to myself. Was this how we all died? "But I can still change this, right?" I asked, my voice pleading, but the Paperman said nothing. Its eyes of flame glittered as his false reflection slowly faded away. Within a few moments, I was looking at my own reflection. The dead, haunted look in my own eyes made me feel sick, and I had to turn away immediately. Even more disturbing, I had specks of blood across my face, but I couldn't for the life of me remember how they had gotten there. I ran scalding water from the sink and tried to clean myself, tried to scrub that filthy blood off, but it seemed to sink in like a stain. Emma and Alice had decided to set up a game of Scrabble after getting bored of watching TV for a couple hours straight. My wife sat on the couch next to them, looking at her letters. She gave me a crooked smile, her blue eyes sparkling, and then spelled out the word, killer. I frowned, looking at the board. "That's not a very good word," I whispered, looking up at her. I kept catching all of them staring at me with an odd look in their eyes, something between terror and sadness. Alice went next, using the Ellen killer to spell out a new word, lunatic. I kept watching the board as Emma went next, her small, wooden letters clicking together in her tiny fingers. She gave a cry of victory as she sorted her letters on the board, spelling the word, insanity. "Oh, that's double points," Emma whispered excitedly as my wife wrote down a score. I started feeling sick for some reason as I watched the words forming on the board in front of me. I grabbed my stomach, running to the bathroom. Their pale, blue eyes seemed to stalk me like spotlights. Their heads ratcheted over in a blur, following me with cold, expressionless faces. I ran out of the room, throwing up in the toilet. I heaved over and over, cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. As I rose, feeling sick and weak and lightheaded, I heard a ragged, death gasp breathing from the shower. The white curtain hung like a funeral shroud, closed and opaque. I caught the barest glimmer of a dark silhouette behind it, however. A long, twisted finger curled around the side of the shower curtain. One flaming eye of the Paperman peeked around at me, half of its rotted, black teeth showing in an insane smile. "The monsters are coming," it hissed. "They're outside right now. Are you ready, killer?" "I'm no killer," I said, my blood pumping in my ears like the echo of a roaring river. "Unless I need to protect myself or my family." The Paperman's fiery eyes sparkled with a sick kind of humor. It gave a laugh like the shattering of bones, drew behind the curtain and disappeared. I splashed cold water on my face before I went out and sat down again with my family. They had given up on Scrabble apparently, turning back on the TV. They sat around it, eating from a giant bowl of popcorn and sipping soda. It was another stupid comedy, but I didn't mind. I was just happy to be with my family. I sat down and took a bite of the popcorn, but it tasted strange. I spit it out into my hand and saw a pile of dead stink pigs there, mashed up and chewed. I gagged, looking down at the popcorn bowl with a growing sense of horror. It was filled with stink bugs. Most of them were dead, but some still squirmed or twisted their black legs or raised their ugly, alien faces. I could taste their rotting cilantro skunk spray on my tongue. It burned all the way down my throat. I quickly threw up everything in my stomach onto the rug of the living room, heaving over and over. Every time I looked down at the bowl of stink pigs with their long, spidery legs and disgusting, fetid odor, I wanted to start vomiting all over again. "This is the police. We have the house surrounded." An artificially amplified voice screamed over a bullhorn as I straightened up, covered in a cold layer of sweat. My stomach wouldn't stop doing flips. It felt like some kind of burning acid had filled it. I wondered if the stink pigs had poisoned me. A feeling of horror and a sense of unreality descended over me like a fog. I glanced out the window, seeing dozens of black SUVs and police cars blocking off the street. They all hid behind their vehicles with guns drawn. A SWAT team was assembling on the sidewalk, their black rifles gleaming and polished under the flickering, white streetlights. They had their entire bodies covered, making them look like giant, black bugs. In that moment, I realized that these were the monsters who had come to take my family away from me. I could see that their plastic helmets and deathly black suits were not suits at all, but the actual skins of their strange, alien bodies. They were working with the Paperman to bring some horrifying, soul-shattering reality into the house. I balled up my fists, holding them to my temples as a scream ripped its way out of my lips. I looked back at my wife and 2 daughters, wondering why they were so quiet all of a sudden. I saw their 3 rotting corpses staring up at the ceiling, their sightless eyes open and eternally filled with horror. They all had bullet holes through their foreheads and looked like they had been dead for a couple days, at least. And then, in a flash, it all came back to me. I remember getting drunk. My wife wouldn't shut up. I told her to fuck off, and we had started arguing. I remember pushing her hard against the wall. She had clawed me across the cheek with her long, sharp nails. I remember punching her in the face and grabbing the shotgun, cocking it. I started screaming at her, my vision turning white with anger. Then there was a long, black spot in my memory that felt as cold and as dark as death itself. Abruptly, I remember coming back, standing over the corpses of my wife and 2 daughters. I wavered on my feet, the shotgun as heavy as a black hole in my hands. I remember bending over, retching. The memory started to run through my mind like water through a sieve, fading away into blissful nothingness. I remember as a little boy how the Paperman used to bring the news to our house. I would stay in the living room in the morning, staring out the window and waiting, excited to see what had happened in the world. When I heard the newspaper slam against the front wall, I would run outside and grab it, tearing it open to read the sharp, screaming headlines. I remember being a child, running outside into the summer dawn, a small, innocent creature of hopes and dreams. All the power in the house was off, I realized abruptly as I looked up. The monsters outside must have cut off the electricity. But then a hissing of static cut through the air, and a moment later, I heard canned laughter. I turned, seeing the flickering screen of the TV. It was the only source of light in the entire house now, except for the spotlights those monsters shone in from outside. I didn't know how the TV was still running without electricity, however. The Paperman's pale face loomed large on the television, his eyes aflame withering me. He grinned up at me, as if we were sharing a private joke. "The news is in," he hissed through a mouthful of black teeth. "Now you know." I shook, my own teeth chattering uncontrollably. I didn't know what he was talking about. "We didn't get the paper yet," I said, my voice high-pitched and childish. We're still waiting." I saw movement from the couch. My wife and 2 daughters sat there, staring at the sitcom on the TV, listening to its false canned laughter. I smiled at them. I watched my family, my circle, my heart and my life. My 2 daughters looked up at me with pleading eyes. My wife hid her hands in her face. "Daddy, protect us from the monsters," Emma cried. "Please, Daddy, don't let them in," Alice said, her blue eyes sad and wet. I nodded grimly, racking the shotgun. I heard movement from the front yard. I glanced out the corner of the front window. There stood a line of monsters with riot shields assembling on the sidewalk, hiding behind their cars like cowards. They stood in the dark, their plasticky skins shining like demons from hell. I shoved the long, black snout of the shotgun through the glass, shattering the window with a sound like a mine snapping. I started shooting out the window, emptying all the slugs in the shotgun as I roared with an insane bloodlust. The shotgun bucked in my hands like a living creature, its explosions ringing like cannon blasts through the dark night. The monsters scattered like cockroaches under the sudden assault. Most took cover, crouching behind their cars, while a few ran behind the nearest houses. Countless pistols and rifles took aim at my house. The single, black eyes of their many barrels focused on me like pointing fingers, accusatory and relentless. Bullets smashed their way through the walls and the windows with their whining and shrieking and shattering of glass. I crouched down behind the sofa, hugging myself and shivering. I looked down at my fingers, seeing dried specks of blood under my nails. Someone shouted over the bullhorn, telling me to surrender, the man's deep voice screaming that I would be gunned down if I resisted. "Get the fuck away from my family." I shrieked toward the shattered window, hugging the shotgun tight to my body. I remembered the article the Paperman had shown me, entire family found dead. Was this how it happened? The monsters outside would come in and kill us all, I decided. That is, if I gave them the chance. Just let them try. Just let them try to take my family away from me, I whispered to myself with determination. At that moment, I thought I caught a whiff of rotting flesh, an odor of feces and rancid gases. My wife's pale, bloody face looked up, and the illusion of my healthy, happy family ripped apart. I saw her eyes had nearly rotted out of her head. They had turned a filmy blue, writhing and dancing with countless maggots. "No one will ever separate us again," she whispered in a voice like the wind through a graveyard. My 2 beautiful girls looked up at me, the bullet holes in their skulls twinkling like crimson stars. The skin of their rotting faces looked loose, falling off. The whites of their eyes had turned blood red from the mutilating impact of the shotgun slugs through their foreheads. "Don't let them separate us, Daddy," they pleaded in a single voice, their bloody lips chattering, the many gaps in their milk teeth as dark and black as fallen tombstones. "Family sticks together," my wife hissed. "We will be together forever." I nodded grimly, grabbing more slugs from my pocket and slamming them into the shotgun. Waves of adrenaline coursed through my body as I mentally prepared myself for the battle ahead. I knew I must kill all the insane, faceless monsters outside who wanted to rip us apart, the demons who wanted to take my family from me.